The State of Crypto is presented by Tron, connecting the world to the power of cryptocurrency.
Welcome back. The U.S. Senate Agriculture Committee is proposing crypto regulation that would make the CFTC the primary regulator over crypto trades that meet commodities law. Joining us now to discuss is former federal prosecutor Grant Fondo, who is now a partner at Goodwin Partner. Welcome to the show, Grant. So there's been a bit of a tug of war between the SEC and CFTC on which U.S. regulator will regulate crypto. So any clarity on how the U.S. will regulate crypto going forward, given that the U.S. Senate seems to suggest the CFTC should be the top regulator?
So it's interesting. That debate has been going on for a long time, and what we've seen in the regulatory market is regulators trying to grab essentially market share. So I don't think this bill will end the uncertainty. I think it helps to potentially, should it get enacted, to provide some certainty as to Bitcoin and Ether, and certainly that is the majority of the market. It's over 50% of the market volume. So I think it's a significant potential legislation, and there's other legislation as well. But I think it will end the uncertainty? Not totally at all. If you see the definition, I think it's still pretty vague how the regulators will treat other currencies and which regulator has control over those.
That's absolutely right. The CFTC has to create a definition for a digital commodity. So while Bitcoin and Ether may be okay, there's really a lot of uncertainty around other crypto tokens and NFTs for that matter. So I don't know if you have any speculation on what will be decided over that.
Over the NFTs, I think so. Listen, the NFTs are sort of a little bit of a different bucket. NFTs in their traditional form, the SEC has made statements that they're not securities. I question whether the CFTC is going to get into it. So those may be, I know there's a lot of activity, there's a lot of interest, but you may not see as much regulatory action on NFTs, at least right now. What you are seeing some concern and issues about is taking the NFTs from their purest form, a piece of art, if you will, to something where they become more like a traditional financial product. And I think that's where you're seeing regulators potentially get more involved.
Yeah, so let's just get back to this whole idea. Exactly what will the SEC do? What do you suspect will be the SEC's purview? Where exactly are its boundaries going to be? We were talking about the CFTC and them taking on the commodity type tokens like Ether and Bitcoin, or what we consider commodities. But if you kind of turn it the other way, where would the SEC's lines be drawn?
What I would say is the SEC generally views, they're still figuring out those lines, but I think other than Bitcoin and Ether, I think they view essentially every other token as fair game. I think there's debate about stablecoins, and I think that there are real questions about whether the SEC would have any regulatory authority over those at all. But setting aside stablecoins, Ether, and Bitcoin, I think the SEC views everything as potentially within their purview for digital assets. So
that would include even the layer ones, the layer one tokens that are kind of operating the way Bitcoin and ETH operate in their own blockchains. So you think that the SEC would say, yeah, they might be similar to Bitcoin and ETH, but they're not Bitcoin and ETH, and there aren't any futures contracts traded on them, so they're ours now. Is that kind of where you would see that, or do you think that the CFTC would try to take on ownership of the layer ones?
Well, I think it's an interesting question. I think until the SEC says we do not believe that is a security, I think you should assume the SEC will actively potentially police it. There's obviously lots of different assets out there, including layer one. I think it remains to be seen whether the CFTC makes a grab for it, or the SEC, or some other regulator. But I would not say that there's clear lines drawn by the SEC as to anything beyond Bitcoin and Ether.
Do you think we'll get further clarity from this investigation on a former Coinbase employee who is being accused of insider trading charges by the Department of Justice as well? In addition to the SEC, they have noted that, there was some front running of securities referring to these crypto tokens. Do you think we might have more clarity on, the state of other cryptocurrencies beside Bitcoin and Ether from this case?
So I think it's interesting. I think it's a great question. I think certainly so there's two aspects of it. There's the criminal aspect, which is not alleged, truly is not alleged as a securities action. So you're not going to get as greater clarity there. The SEC complaint is alleged as a securities action, obviously insider trading. They have listed and identified 9 different tokens, and they've identified factors, which I think do provide some clarity, at least as to what the SEC's view of the world is. But whether those issues actually get litigated all the way to the end and a judge or jury makes a decision to provide clarity on those 9 assets, and there's some other assets that the SEC mentioned as well that are not identified in the complaint, we'll have to see. Typically, the criminal case takes precedent, and so you may not even get to the SEC issues.
If you're XRP, if you're Ripple, are you thrilled with any of this? Does this make you happy, or do you think that they're still going to have to deal with the SEC for some time to come?
So I think that's a great question too as well. I think so. What's fascinating is if let's say this legislation gets enacted, do you see XRP Ripple, for example, running into the CFTC and saying, we want to essentially get regulated by you? Now, obviously, that we're having an exchange do that essentially on the, sort of on their behalf. I think it's a fascinating issue. And then, of course, if that happens, it becomes very interesting for the SEC's lawsuit. So I think time will tell how the legislation will impact existing litigation as well as future litigation.